Hello everyone, this is Dr. Prashant and welcome back to Epidemiology lecture series. In this lecture, we will discuss about the topic epidemiological study designs. To start with the outline, epidemiological study methods are broadly classified into two types, observational and interventional. Under observational, we see descriptive and analytical study designs. Under descriptive, we see correlational studies, case reports or case series, and cross-sectional studies. Under analytical, we see cohort and case control. Under interventional studies, we see randomized control trials and quasi-experimental study design. Descriptive studies. It describes patterns of disease occurrence in relation to variables such as person, place, time. Through descriptive studies, we can formulate hypotheses. So, as already discussed, there are three types of descriptive studies: correlational studies, case reports or case series, and cross-sectional survey of individuals. To begin with correlational studies, in correlational studies, measures that represent characteristic of entire populations are used to describe disease in relation to some factor of interest such as age, calendar time, utilization of health services, etc. The correlation coefficient denoted by small r is the descriptive measure of association in correlational studies. Let's understand this with a small example. To describe patterns of mortality from coronary heart disease in 1960, death rates from 44 states were correlated with per capita cigarette sales. So here we are taking that measure that represent the characteristic of entire populations. So through this, death rates were highest in states with the most cigarette sales, lowest in those with the least sales, and intermediate in the remainder. And what is the hypothesis formulated in this case? Cigarette smoking causes fatal coronary heart disease, which has been substantiated in large number of subsequent analytic epidemiological studies. So whatever hypothesis formulated, that can be tested through analytical epidemiological studies. And coming to the limitation of correlational studies, as already discussed, correlational studies data represent average exposure levels rather than actual individual values, because we are taking the population characteristic feature. And also the lack of ability to control for the effects of potential confounding factors is the limitation of correlational study. So let's see an example for this limitation. In a study of average per capita daily intake of pork in relation to breast cancer mortality rates in 28 countries in 1964 to 1965, there was a possible association between pork intake and death from breast cancer. So here they thought that there was an association between pork intake and breast cancer directly. But increased pork intake is associated with other factors like increased intake of dietary fat and decreased intake of vegetables or higher socioeconomic status. So all these are confounders. So these come under the limitation of correlational study. And now coming to the second type of descriptive study, case reports and case series. While correlational studies consider whole populations, case reports and case series describe the experience of a single patient or a group of patients with a similar diagnosis. These case reports are most published in medical journals. Here, the clinician identifies an unusual feature of a disease or a patient's history lead to the formation of a new hypothesis. In this way, they form an important interface between clinical medicine and epidemiology. We know the most important difference between clinical medicine and epidemiology. That is, in epidemiology, the unit of study is population, whereas in clinical medicine, it's the individual. Let's understand this with an example. Between October 1980 and May 1981, 5 cases of pneumocystis carinii pneumonia were reported among young, previously healthy, homosexual men in Los Angeles. So this pneumocystis carinii was previously occurred only in older cancer patients, where their immune system was suppressed as a result of chemotherapy. But they observed 5 cases of this in young, previously healthy homosexual men. Similarly, Kaposi sarcoma were diagnosed in young homosexual men, where it was previously seen exclusively in elderly men and women equally. So the Center for Disease Control initiated a surveillance program to understand this so that they can quantitate the magnitude of this problem. This led to the identification of young homosexual men as high-risk individuals to develop this syndrome. Subsequent case reports and case series suggested that AIDS also resulted from blood-borne transmission among intravenous drug abusers. So through subsequent analytic studies conducted using clues provided by the descriptive studies through these case reports and series led to the identification of number of specific risk factors for the development of AIDS. This is how HIV as a transmissible agent was identified. And now coming to the limitation of this study design, it cannot be used to test for the presence of a valid statistical association because in case report, it is based on experience of only one person or one patient. In case series, lack of an appropriate comparison group. And coming to the third type, cross-sectional surveys. It is also known as prevalence survey. They are carried out at one time point or over a short period. In this case, exposure and disease status are assessed simultaneously among individuals in a well-defined population. They provide information about the frequency and characteristics of a disease by furnishing a snapshot of the health experience of a population at a specified time. It helps to assess health status and healthcare needs in a population. A cross-sectional study design is used when the purpose of the study is descriptive, often in the form of a survey. Here we get the snapshot of a health experience. Advantages of cross-sectional studies. As I already said, it's a snapshot. It's relatively inexpensive and takes up little time to conduct. Can estimate prevalence of outcome of interest because sample is usually taken from the whole population. Many outcome and risk factors can be assessed through cross-sectional study design. And there is no loss to follow up because we are not going to follow anyone. It's just a snapshot at a specified time period. And it is useful for public health planning, understanding disease etiology, and for the generation of hypotheses. Let's understand this with an example. In 1956, the US Congress passed the National Health Survey Act, which established periodic surveys to obtain data on the prevalence of acute and chronic diseases, disabilities, utilization of healthcare resources, and relevant demographic and personal characteristics for the purpose of effective healthcare planning and administration. So, let's talk about the limitations now. Since exposure and disease status are assessed at a single point in time, as I already said, it's a snapshot. In many cases, it is not possible to determine whether the exposure preceded or resulted from the disease. It is also known as chicken or egg dilemma. And next, it's only a snapshot. That means the situation may provide different results if another time frame had been chosen. And the last limitation is the prevalence incident bias or the Neyman bias. It is a type of selection bias which occurs when individuals with severe or mild disease are excluded, resulting in an error in the estimated association between an exposure and an outcome. And now coming to the ecological studies. Ecological study is a descriptive study basically in which data are analyzed at a population or group level rather than individual level. They are often used to measure prevalence and incidence of disease, particularly when disease is rare. The purpose of this study is to monitor population health so that public health strategies may be developed and directed. Helps to make large comparisons. We can compare two countries through ecological studies. It helps to study the relationship between population level exposure to risk factors and disease. It is useful when individual level data would either be difficult or impossible to collect. So there are three types of ecological studies. One is geographical, where we compare one geography with another by assessing the health of the population of each. Second is longitudinal. A population is monitored to assess changes in disease over time. Migration. Data of migrant populations are collected and analyzed, and the unit of interest is neither time nor place but the population type in migration ecological study design. And now coming to one important topic, that is ecological fallacy. It is a type of confounding specific to ecological studies. It occurs when relationships which exist for groups are assumed to be also true for individuals. Association observed between variables at the group level does not necessarily mean that the same association exists for any given individual selected from the group. And now coming to the analytical studies, the first analytical study is the case control study. It is an observational analytic epidemiological study. Subjects are selected based on whether they do or do not have a particular disease under study. For example, if you want to know an association between smoking and cancer, we select the subjects based on the presence of the disease, that is cancer. They are called as cases, and those who are free from the particular disease, that is cancer, are known as controls. And the direction of case control study is retrospective, that is backwards. We start from outcome, that is the disease, and we go backwards towards the exposure. Steps of case control study, there are basically 4 steps. We start with the selection of cases and controls, then we do matching to make two groups comparable, and then measurement of exposure and association. Usually it's odds ratio in case of case control studies. And the last step is the analysis and interpretation. Strengths of case control study. It is very quick and inexpensive, optimal for rare diseases, can examine multiple etiological factors for a single disease because we are starting from disease, right? From disease to exposure. Well suited to the evaluation of diseases with long latent periods. And coming to the limitations of case control study, rare exposure, in case of rare exposure, and the temporal relationship between exposure and disease may be difficult to establish in some situations. And the last one is the prone to bias. And now the measure of association in case control study is the odds ratio, which we have already discussed. Odds ratio is nothing but odds of outcome in exposed individuals divided by odds of outcome in unexposed individuals. So if you remember the 2 into 2 table for odds ratio, if you can see the columns, cases and controls. Cases are those people who are having the disease and controls are those who are free from the disease. And on the left side, you can see the exposure status of these cases and controls. So after making this table, we can simply calculate odds ratio by first calculate the odds of outcome in exposed. That is, if you go to the exposure column, the odds of outcome in exposed will be A upon B, and then odds of outcome in non-exposed. So go to the non-exposed section where it is C upon D. So odds ratio is A by B divided by C by D. That is AD by BC, or simply you can say it's a cross multiplication. That is A multiplied by D upon C into B. So let's see an example. So in this case, if you calculate the odds ratio, that is 75 multiplied by 75 divided by 25 into 25. So we got odds ratio as 9. So a simple interpretation can be exposed group has 9 times the risk of developing breast cancer as the unexposed group. So in this case, the outcome of interest is the breast cancer. Cohort studies are observational analytical studies, or we can call them as follow-up study, because we follow a group of people for a period of time. Group or groups of individuals are defined based on presence or absence of exposure to a suspected risk factor for a disease. At the time exposure status is defined, all potential subjects must be free from the disease under investigation, and eligible participants are then followed over a period to assess the occurrence of that outcome. For example, if you want to see the association between smoking and cancer, if you are starting your cohort study today, all the subjects selected must be free from the disease, that is cancer. So then after that, you follow them for a period of time. Temporal association between exposure and disease can be established in cohort study design. Let's understand cohort study with a small example. Nurses Health Study of over 120,000 female nurses in the US has examined the relationship of oral contraceptive use with breast and ovarian cancer, malignant melanoma, as well as myocardial infarction. So basically, in this example, the exposure was oral contraceptive use, whereas the outcome was breast and ovarian cancer, malignant melanoma, and also MI. So in this case, there is only single exposure, right? So this is a small example for cohort study. And now coming to the types of cohort study, even though by default we say cohort study as a prospective study, there are 2 types of cohort study. One is the usual prospective study, where the relevant exposure may or may not have occurred at the time the study is begun. For suppose I am starting my study today, the relevant exposure, that is for example smoking in case of smoking and cancer, may or may not have occurred at the time of my study, but the outcome have certainly not yet occurred. No subject should have the disease. So basically in prospective we start from present to future. And coming to the second type of cohort study, which is retrospective study, in this case both exposure and outcomes of interest have already occurred when the study is initiated. It is very quick and cheap because we are going from present to past. For example, if this is 2023, I go back to 2015, there I conduct my cohort study. So this is the main difference between prospective study and the retrospective cohort study design. Coming to the strengths of cohort study, it is most used when the exposure is rare or the disease is common. Through cohort studies, we can get multiple effects of single exposure, like in the previous example, and also the temporal relationship can be established. And the last strength, that is, it allows direct measurement of incidence of disease in the exposed and non-exposed groups, because we follow them for a period of time. So all the new cases which occur during the follow-up period, we can use them as the incidence of that particular disease. And now coming to the limitations, it is inefficient in case of rare diseases. And in prospective study design, extremely expensive and time consuming, because we need to follow a group of people for a very long period. and in retrospective design the availability of records, because in retrospective cohort study, like I already said, if this is 2023, I should go back to 2015 and I need to collect my data for the study. So the availability of records can be a limitation in that case, where in retrospective study design. And the last limitation is the losses to follow-up. Some people might drop out in the study. The measure of association in cohort studies relative risk or RR, whereas in case control studies it's odds ratio. Relative risk can be calculated by the incidence risk in exposed population divided by incidence risk in unexposed population, and the table looks similar to the case control study, but instead of those terms cases and controls we use the diseased and non-diseased population. So incidence in exposed will be, you go to the exposed line, A upon the total, A plus B, and now incidence in non-exposed will be C upon C plus D. So the relative risk will be A by A plus B divided by C plus D. Let's look into an example. So in this case, the incidence risk in exposed will be 60 upon 60 plus 140, that is 0.3. The incidence risk in unexposed will be 25 upon 25 plus 175, that is 0.125. So in this case, the RR will be 0.3 divided by 0.125, which is approximately 2.4. And a simple interpretation can be, exposed group has 2.4 times the risk of developing lung cancer as the unexposed group. In this example, the outcome of interest is the lung cancer. And if you can see on the right side, if relative risk is exactly equal to 1, that means there is no association between the exposure and the outcome. If RR is greater than 1, there is a positive association between exposure and outcome. If relative risk is less than 1, then there is a negative association between the exposure and the outcome of interest. And now coming to the second type of epidemiological study method, that is experimental or interventional study design. Basically, in observational studies, the researcher, we don't interfere in the study, like we don't do any intervention. We just observe the thing as they are. Whereas in experimental or interventional study design, we do some intervention, we do some experiment in this case. So basically there are two types of experimental studies. One is clinical trials and the other is the community trials. In clinical trials, we use the individual subjects, whereas in community trials, a group of individuals are used. A simple example for clinical trial can be to determine the efficacy of a drug or a procedure on the patient. And a simple example for community trials can be evaluation of fluorides in preventing dental caries. So this we are thinking from the point of public health. So now let's understand the randomized control trial in detail. RCT is an experimental study design in which individuals are randomly allocated to two groups. One is experimental group and the other is the control group. Experimental group receive the drug being tested, whereas the control group receive inert substance or placebo. So there are three types of clinical trials: therapeutic trials, interventional trials, and preventive trials. Example for these can be, for therapeutic trials, laser treatment for diabetic retinopathy. For interventional trials, physical exercise for decreasing the risk of myocardial infarction. Whereas in preventive trials, we try to prevent the occurrence, right? So this can be called as prophylactic trial. An example can be BCG vaccine for tuberculosis. So now let's look into the outline of randomized control trial. So we start from the reference population. From reference population, we select the experimental population. So we divide this experimental population into two, participants and non-participants. We take the participants and then we randomly allocate them to treatment and control group, as already discussed. So those people who are in treatment group, some might be treated and some might refuse the treatment, right? So those who got treated are then followed and we wait for the outcome. Similarly, for the control group, we follow them equally with the treatment group and we check for the outcome. This is the basic design of RCT. And now coming to the next concept, that is blinding. Blinding is basically a procedure in which one or more parties in a trial are kept unaware of which treatment arms participants have been assigned to, because the knowledge of whether the participant was in treatment or control group can influence the observation, resulting in biased inferences either consciously or subconsciously. In order to avoid and prevent this conscious or unconscious bias in the design, blinding is done. So there are three types of blinding based on the parties in a trial: single blind or single masked, double blind or double masked, triple blind or triple masked. Let's look into each of them briefly. In single blinding, participant is unaware whether they are in experimental or control group. In double blinding, both the participant and the observer or assessor of the subject are blind regarding the subject's group allocation. Both the subject and observer do not know whether they belongs to experimental or control group. And in triple blinding, the observer of the subject and the person analyzing the data are all blind regarding the group to which a specific individual belongs. So basically in triple blinding, all the three, the participant, the observer and also the data analyst do not know whether the participants belong to treatment or control group. So this is a simple representation of types of blinding. So as already said, in single blind, the subject or the participant is unaware, whereas in double blind, both the subject and observer is unaware of the allocation. Whereas in triple blinding, all the three, subject, observer and data analyst, are unaware of the participant allocation. And the most commonly or most frequently used method is the double blinding. Thank you.